Hello everyone, this is Gaurav Kumar Vani, Assistant Professor Agriculture Economics at JNKV Jabalpur. Today we are going to talk about consumer surplus for beginners as well as some topics until advanced levels as well. So let's see first the background of this topic, where the consumer surplus is. So it's a part of welfare economics, so it is a measure of welfare of consumer. It was first formulated by Dupuit, a French civil engineer. Here is a picture. He was interested in social welfare of public goods, especially the bridge, canals, roads. So he wanted to know, if a bridge is constructed, what amount of social welfare will happen because of bridge, sometimes because of railroads, likewise for canals, for farmers, and ultimately consumer also. Um, this concept was further refined by Alfred Marshall, a British economist, a very famed economist, in his book Principles of Economics in 1890. Coming to the concept, according to Alfred Marshall, consumer surplus is simply the difference between price that one is willing to pay and the price one actually pays for a particular product. So it's very simple, what you are willing to pay versus what you actually pay. So more often than not, we are always ready to pay more, but we end up paying less because market price is way less than what we intend to pay. Some other alternative measures or definition of consumer surplus. So it is defined as extra satisfaction which the consumer obtains from buying a good. So excess of the price a consumer would be willing to pay rather than go without it. So how much extra are we ready to pay over and above the market price in order to get that commodity rather than go without it. So amount a consumer must be paid to give up the entire consumption of some good. So each one of these definition is valid in some or the other context. Assumption made by Marshall, it varies from book to book. I tried to compile a list. So first is, we assume that rational consumer. So the moment we say he's a rational consumer, he follows the law of diminishing marginal utility. And when he follows law of diminishing marginal utility, obvious it is that marginal utility is equals to price is the point at which he will stop the consumption of the commodity. So when marginal utility is equals to price. So this is about rational consumer. So he has limited amount of budget. Perfect competition prevails. So one implication of perfect competition is constant market price of the commodity. So in a static scenario, when he is consuming the commodity or when he is going to purchase the commodity in the market, the price of the commodity will obviously be constant for him, because no matter what amount he buys in the market, uh, the price will not change because he is simply a price taker. Quasi-linear preferences. So the utility function is quasi-linear in nature. So one implication is constant marginal utility of money, which the Marshall assumed. So Marshall assumed there are zero income effects. Indifference curves are vertically parallel to each other because of assuming quasi-linear preferences or quasi-linear utility function. And very famous assumption of Marshall, ceteris paribus, uh, that is all other things remains same, like taste, preference, anything that is not stated anywhere here, all other things including substitutes remains the same. So demand curve is very much related to consumer surplus, because we are saying that this is what we pay, this is what we actually pay, what we are willing to pay. So the demand curve depicts marginal willingness to pay of consumer. So what the consumer is willing to pay for additional unit of the commodity. So if consumer has already got 3 units, so what amount is he ready to pay for the fourth unit? positive portion of marginal utility curve. This is the definition of the demand curve, because positive portion of marginal utility curve in LDMU, law of diminishing marginal utility, is the demand curve, relevant demand curve for the commodity. Thus, from the demand curve one can read reserve price, which we will talk later, maximum willingness to pay for additional quantity, that is your marginal willingness to pay. So what amount you are ready to pay at max for getting the additional 1 unit of the commodity. Then marginal utility. So if you see, the price that you read on the demand curve is actually a marginal utility that you have converted into monetary terms. When the commodity is perfectly divisible, so we did not make any assumption there whether a commodity was perfectly divisible or a discrete good. So each case here we are going to illustrate one by one. So when the commodity is perfectly divisible, in this case, consumer surplus is the area under demand curve above price line. So here is a demand curve D dash. Here is a price line P naught E. This is a price line, and the quantity which the consumer bought is Q naught. So the consumer surplus is this area P naught P max E, or you can say P naught DE. So the area of the triangle P naught P max E is the consumer surplus. So quantity purchased is OQ naught, and the price difference between maximum that you could have paid and you actually pay, the maximum for any unit of the commodity you could have paid is P max, and the price you actually pay is P naught. So the difference is P naught P max, and when we try to find the area of this triangle P naught P max E, then you know the area of the triangle is half of the base into the length of the perpendicular. So the base here is OQ naught, the perpendicular here is P naught P max. So half into OQ naught into P naught P max is the consumer surplus. When the commodity is perfectly divisible but the demand curve is not linear, then start with the inverse demand function to obtain the area under demand curve using integration from origin O to Q naught. Deduct area under price line up to Q naught from area under demand curve. So here we have Q naught. So this is OQ naught. So this is the demand curve D dash, which is non-linear in this case, and we have to find first area under this demand curve from origin O to Q naught, and then deduct the area under this price line, which is P naught E. So this O P naught E Q naught will be deducted. So we are going to see this. So consumer surplus. So first we are going to see the area O P max E Q naught. So this is the total amount of utility that you are having from consuming OQ naught amount of commodity minus, because consumer surplus is the net benefit. So now you are going to see, we will integrate from OQ naught over this whole demand curve, which is inverse demand curve, which is PQ naught. So integration OQ naught PQ dq minus this area which is in yellow here, this yellow area, which is O P naught E Q naught, and this area is, if you simply understand it, is as P naught Q naught, or you can say O P naught E Q naught and O Q naught. So this is how we do. So this formula is applicable for linear demand curve as well as, if you know the integration, you can do calculation of consumer surplus for any kind of demand curve. So we are deducting from the total utility of the consumer the expenditure made towards purchase of this commodity. Now coming to a simple case of a discrete good. So here in this discrete good, we are going to consider each unit separately for the good. So for the first unit, the price which the consumer is ready to pay is 8.91, whatever may be the monetary unit. And the height of the bar is the reservation price for the respective demand level. So for the first unit, he is ready to pay 8.91. Now reservation price is the price at which the consumer is indifferent between buying and not buying. That means if the price is even marginally higher than 8.91, the consumer is not going to purchase the commodity. That means the quantity which he consumes is zero. And if the price is 8.91 or below, then he will purchase 1 unit of the commodity. Then for the second unit, he is ready to pay the 7.97 per unit of the commodity, additional commodity. For the third one, he is ready to pay 7.02 per unit of the commodity. For the fourth unit, he is ready to pay 6.07. For the next fifth unit, he is ready to pay 5.30. Next, he is ready to pay 4.20, and the next he is ready to pay 3.37. And what is so important to learn is this is following law of diminishing marginal utility, because as you go on purchasing more and more, your utility from addition of stock is always going to diminish. This is what LDMU says, and this is diminishing. Now, because of this law, you are ready to pay less and less for additional unit of commodity. So the demand curve is a stepwise demand curve, which you can see through animation, the black line, and this black line shows the demand curve, and the area under this black line and above this x-axis is the gross benefit, because this is, as I said earlier, this is the total utility you have obtained from purchase of this 7 unit of the commodity. And further, this is the demand curve, exactly how it looks like. This is a step demand curve. This is not continuous. So going further, we can see that the price which prevails in the market is 3.37. So the consumer equates the marginal utility with the price. So the marginal utility is now equal to price, that is 3.37. So the marginal utility obtains in cardinal terms. Marginal utility can be measured in price. So MU can be measured in price. So reservation price is nothing but the marginal utility. So now we can say that the consumer has reached this equilibrium. Therefore, the demand curve here falls straight at 7th. It's not going to 8, 9 something further. And the expenditure on buying 7 units of good is provided in this colored box. So this area shows the expenditure he has made on buying the 7 units. So it's simply multiplication of 3.37 with 7. And the area left here and colored in yellow is the consumer surplus. So the area above price line, this is the price line, and below this demand curve is the consumer surplus. We can see in a tabular form also the same thing. So if we see for the first unit, the reservation price was 8.91. What he pays in the market is 3.37. The excess of marginal utility over the price, this is the excess of benefit, so which is 5.54. So for the first unit, the cumulative benefit is 5.54, because for the 0 unit, the excess was 0 because he is not purchasing anything and he is not paying anything. For the second unit, the reservation price was 7.97, market price is 3.37, the excess of marginal utility over price is 4.6. So if we add 4.6 to 5.54, which is here, 5.54 added to 4.6 is 10.1. For the third unit, he is ready to pay 7.02. The market price is 3.37. He is still happy. And here the excess of marginal utility over price is 3.65, which is added to this 10.1. So the cumulative comes to about 13.8. Everything rounded off to 1 decimal place. Then the next unit price he is reserved to pay 6.07 or below this. He actually pays 3.37. The excess of marginal utility or the benefit he derives is 2.7. 2.7 added to this 13.8 is 16.5. For the fifth unit, he is ready to pay 5.30. The market price is 3.37 because this is perfect competition, and the excess is 1.93. Then 1.93 added to the 16.5 becomes 18.4. Then for the sixth unit, his reservation price comes down to 4.20. He is ready to pay 3.37. The excess of marginal utility or price is 0.83. Then you add it to 18.4, which is becoming 19.3. For the seventh unit, he is ready to pay 3.37. The market price is exactly 3.37. He does not derive any additional benefit now over the price, so he stops consumption because he does not see any further benefit in consuming the 8th unit. And 0 added to 19.3 is 19.3. So this 19.3 is the measure of consumer surplus. Then coming to quasi-linear preferences. So such preferences involve utility function, which is non-linear function of one good, linear function of other good. That is, if I can write utility by u, so utility is now function of x and y, therefore I write u of x comma y, which is equal to vx plus y, where vx is non-linear function of quantity of good x such that v dash x, that is marginal utility of x, that is first partial difference of u with respect to x is v dash x is greater than 0. That means upon consumption of additional unit, the marginal utility goes on increasing, but v double dash x, that is slope of marginal utility of x, goes on decreasing, and v0 is equals to 0. That means upon consuming the 0 unit, the utility of x is 0. Marginal utility from consuming additional utility of x is mux, that is in discrete terms we can write, that is for considering it is continuous. In discrete terms we can write for nth unit, we can write vxn minus vxn minus 1. Remember, you must be thinking, what about y? So we always calculate marginal by keeping other things constant. So y is constant, so y will obviously get cancelled. Then Quasi-linear preferences and reservation price. So once again, reservation price at which the consumer is indifferent between buying and not buying. So for R1 reservation price, the consumer is indifferent between buying the first unit or not. For R2, he is indifferent between buying the second unit or not. Should I buy second unit or should I remain at first unit? For R3, he is thinking, is indifferent between should I buy third unit or should I stop at second unit. For R4, he is indifferent between buying the fourth unit or should I stop at third unit. So he is always thinking like this. So demand curve is positive portion of marginal utility curve. So all the reservation prices also reflect the marginal utility. So MU is equals to reservation price always. Yes, we have proved it. For the first unit of X, MU of X is equals to V1 minus V0. This is for the first unit, which should always equal R1. Similarly, now we can just write MUX is equals to V1 minus 0 equal to R1, because in the previous slide we have seen that V0 is nothing but 0. So we can write V1 is equals to R1. Let's see for some other units until 7. So from our learning, we know V1 is equals to R1. That is, marginal utility of the first unit is always equal to its reservation price. For the second unit of X, V2 minus V1, because this is the utility obtained from consuming 2 units minus the utility obtained from consuming 1 unit. So this difference is marginal utility of consuming second unit, which should equal the reservation price for second unit. Similarly, for third unit we can write. Likewise, for the remaining units we can write. Now, when adding up this reservation price for all units, that is R1 plus R2 plus R3 plus R4 plus R5 plus R6 plus R7. So whatever expressions we have got for this reservation price before in terms of utilities, we will add them up and you can see very easily they will easily cancel each other except for V7. So finally we see that if we add up all the reservation prices, it equals the total utility from consuming the 7 units of commodity. So we can say that the addition of reservation price for all units consumed is equal to the total utility or the total benefit obtained from consuming this many units. So when adding up reservation prices for all units, we got gross benefit. Now if the market price is R7, then the expenditure on 7 units of good is 7 into R7. Thus, consumer surplus or the net benefit to consumer is the total utility from consuming 7 units of goods, which is V7, minus 7 times R7. So this is our consumer surplus or net benefit to consumer. So talking about change in consumer surplus, let there be a consumer with quasi-linear preferences. So we can write the utility function like this. So where Y is considered to be expenditure on all other commodities, and let Y is equals to M minus PX, where M is the income of the consumer, P is the price of the commodity X. So Y is expenditure which is incurred on all other commodities. So we can write after substitution something like this. So after some policy changes, suppose price of good X changes in market to P dash from P, and quantity of goods X changes to X dash. Now we can write the utility function U dash is equals to V of X dash plus M minus P dash X dash after substitution. Thus change in consumer surplus is now u minus u dash. So we can subtract the Vx plus m minus Px with this you subtract Vx dash m and P dash x dash. So finally we get Vx minus Vx dash minus bracket of Px minus P dash x dash. So this is what the change in consumer surplus is. Now we are going to see the same thing graphically also. So if the price increases from R7 to, let's say, somewhere around R5, not exactly R5, then the quantity which the consumer consumes changes to, let's say, 5 units. Why only 5 units? Why not other? Because this is a case of discrete good. The reservation price is here and the price is less than the reservation price for the fifth unit. So obviously consumer will consume fifth unit but will not consume fifth unit because it is greater than R6. So consumer is not ready to pay for the sixth unit more than his reservation price. So definitely consumer will not consume 6 unit. So he will stick with this 5 units. Definitely. And now loss of consumer surplus is depicted in green color, whole of this green area, right? So yellow one was the consumer surplus originally. After increase in price, this is the area lost because of increase in price. So this is change in consumer surplus by this green amount. In case of continuous demand function, earlier we had discrete one. So this yellow one is the extent of consumer surplus. Now the price increases to P1 from P0. The quantity demanded decreases from Q0 to Q1, and this green color whole area, this one is loss of consumer surplus. What is so important to learn is that this area which is depicted here is Vx minus Vx dash. So this is the changes in utility because of loss of consumption. He is consuming now 2 units less. So the changes in utility something like this. Here also this triangle is denoting the loss due to reduction in the quantity consumed. This one is depicting the loss which is occurring because now he has to pay more. Here also this is the loss now because of paying more for the remaining units. Changes in consumer surplus. Original utility level U is equals to Vx plus M minus Px. After some policy changes, we have seen this earlier. Thus with compensating income of C, both the utilities must be equal. So in compensating variation in income, we always think that the consumer must be compensated because of some policy changes whatever is happening. So the utility in the latter case after policy change must be equal to the utility which he was originally having. So therefore if some loss is happening after policy change, so we will add an income of C, that is the compensation. So after rearranging both the side, we see therefore C is equals to Vx minus Vx dash minus Px minus P dash x dash. After taking away equivalent benefits of amount E from consumer, both utilities must be equal. So equivalent benefit says if the consumer is having less utility afterwards, then why compensate him? Let's take away some amount from him to make him have utility as good as he is having now after policy change. So how much amount should have been taken from the consumer so that he is as well of uh, in the later case also. So now we are deducting some amount from the consumer's earlier level of income. So M, and this is minus E. Earlier we were adding in compensating variation M, and this is plus C. So now after rearranging both the side, so Vx minus Vx dash minus bracket of Px minus P dash x dash. Now you can see these C and these E are the same thing. In quasi-linear preferences, the compensating variation, equivalent variation, as well as consumer surplus changes are all equal. So this is the beauty. So therefore, in Marshallian terms, all are equal, all are equal. But when you go for some other types of preferences, Cobb-Douglas preferences, some other type of preferences, then all the three will be or may be different. So this is only a special case which we have discussed here. Application of consumer surplus. So we are talking of taxation. So government always wants to capture a part of consumer surplus as a tax. So this is the original consumer surplus because it is the area above price line and below this demand curve. So if price goes up because the government puts a tax, and because of the tax, now the price that consumer pays increases. The price which the producer receives is also decreasing here, and this is the area. This area is the amount of tax which the government collects. So this tax is always collected at the reduced quantity, because after application of tax the quantity decreases to Q1. So this area is the revenue which is collected as through tax. So this is this green one. In this portion is the loss of consumer surplus, green one. This blue one is the loss of producer surplus. So what is producer surplus? So producer surplus is the area above this supply curve and below this price line. In special case of perfect competition, this is area between price line and the marginal cost curve, because marginal cost curve is the supply curve. So this is loss of producer surplus, this is price line, this is the supply curve. So this much of area is lost because now the instead of receiving this P naught price, the price has come down here for the producer. So producer gets less price, consumer pays more price, but the government is able to tax the both. So now this is the amount of tax revenue collected by the government, and this is amount of the deadweight loss. This is the loss from both the side, consumer as well as producer, which is not going to government as a tax. And this is a great concern. This is a great concern that neither the consumer is able to enjoy, nor the producer is able to enjoy, and not even the government is able to enjoy. This is a loss to the society as a whole, and this is called as deadweight loss. Now coming to welfare loss in monopoly compared to perfect competition. So monopoly, you already know that average revenue and marginal revenue are different. In perfect competition, average revenue and marginal revenue are same, but in monopoly they are different, and marginal revenue is always half of the average revenue. So what you can see here, MR is always equal to MC. This is the rule for deciding the optimum level of production. So MR and MC are equal here at this point. So the quantity which he produces Q star M, M for monopoly, and the price is read from this average revenue curve because this is the demand curve. So from this demand curve, the price which is determined is P star M. And had it been a case of perfect competition, then marginal cost is equals to price, P is equals to MC, we know, which is here. So the price which will be decided is P star C, C for competitive, and the quantity which is decided is Q star C. So obvious it is that the quantity which is decided in perfect competition is more, the price which is decided is less. So obvious it is consumer is in greater welfare in the perfect competition compared to the monopoly. So this was the amount of consumer surplus in monopoly before. But if the price charged is P star C, then the consumer surplus increases by this blue one. So this is benefit to consumer for same quantity as in monopoly by charging the lower prices. And this brick color area is benefit to consumer at competitive price from extra consumption, because now he is able to enjoy extra quantity Q star M, Q star C. And this green color area is the extra producer surplus available at competitive prices, but not at monopoly prices. So what happens is this total area, which is including extra benefit, consumption benefit and extra producer surplus, is which is not available because of monopoly, is a deadweight loss to society from having a monopoly compared to the perfect competition. So consumer surplus as well as producer surplus are very important. Together they are called as economic surplus. Producer surplus plus consumer surplus together are called as economic. One more application of consumer surplus is that consumer surplus is infinite in necessities of life. So the consumer is ready to pay any amount for the given quantity. So the demand curve D dash is a vertical line. So for a given quantity, as much the producer wants to extract, he can extract the price. So the currently let's assume the supply curve is S dash and the price which is charged is P star. The quantity is fixed. So we can say that this red area is the area above price line and below demand curve, which is unbounded from the upper side. So this area is infinite, therefore consumer surplus is infinite. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any queries or question, you can write to me an email at gkwani@jnkv.org. Thank you so much.